those relevant passages to the record. It's Exhibit N2. If you go to page 140, are you there?
Paragraph number, I'm afraid not. I don't think I will be.
Exhibit N2, it's a separate file of Mr. Goran. If you go to page 140, you will see the status of the rand-dollar exchange as at December 2015. You don't have to read it on the record. It was read by Mr. Goran. When you look at those figures from Wednesday the 9th up until Friday the 11th of December 2015, would that also accord to your experience at the time?
Yes, I would say it is correct.
Now you may proceed to discuss in detail the meeting which you were dealing with between yourself and the Director General.
I went into the Director General's office to consult with him about the statement that we both agreed would need to be released. And we both understood that such a statement would need the approval of the minister who was announced the previous night. The Director General then phoned the minister in my presence. He put the minister on speakerphone and explained to the minister that I was also on the line, and explained to the minister why I was on the line.
And that was Minister van Rooyen?
That was Minister van Rooyen.
Yes.
The Director General proceeded to congratulate the minister, and I will not repeat some of the things that he said as he has testified to them, but part of the conversation that I was particularly interested in was the one that concerned what statement we would release to the minister, to the public. The Director General then talked to the minister about the negative market reaction and explained to the minister that there was need for the National Treasury to respond. He offered the services of National Treasury officials to draft such a statement. I should explain that the process of drafting a statement is a consultative one, and it is impossible to do it within an hour.
Can you explain what does it entail to draft such a statement?
Yeah, in this case, it would entail, and this is what the Director General was suggesting to the minister. He was suggesting that he was offering the services of the senior treasury officials to draft such a statement, which the minister would then approve, and the plan was that shortly after his swearing in, that statement would be released to the public.
And what was the minister's reaction during the telephone?
The minister told the DG that there was a statement that was already drafted, and that the National Treasury did not need to worry about such a statement. And he said he would provide the statement to the DG later.
Now, according to you, was that telephone call, helpful at all in relation to what was happening in the markets at the time?
No, it was not. It was not for the reason that I have given earlier, that preparing a statement is a consultative process, and we wanted such a statement to be released shortly after his swearing-in ceremony. But also, it was not helpful because we did not know what was in the statement that the minister had told us had been prepared.
What were you hoping to achieve with the DG when you called the minister? What were your expectations?
Our expectations was that the minister would work with us. The minister would give us his approval to start drafting a statement, but more importantly, that the minister would give us guidance on what he thinks should be said publicly about the developments of the previous night.
Now, during that period, how was the staff morale?
We were in shock. There was almost a sense of mourning within Treasury that morning. A lot of us did not know what to make sense of the developments. And we really were in shock. We were just standing around talking to each other, and we were in shock.
And did the DG, address the staff around the issues that were happening at the time?
We discussed the DG addressing staff, and the concern was that it was important for that to happen in the presence of the minister. But in the phone call, one of the things that were discussed by the DG and the minister was the minister coming to the office, and the minister had indicated that he would not be able to come to the office and that he would meet us at the union buildings at the swearing ceremony. So, given the shock that the staff was in, and we discussed with the DG the idea of going to address staff, and we decided that it was a good idea for the DG to address staff. He then went downstairs, and the room was packed to the rafters. Everyone wanted to hear what he said. And he made few comments to the staff, the essence of which was that as National Treasury officials, our main responsibility is to serve the nation. No matter what the developments of the day were, we should be less concerned about that and more concerned about going back to our desks and doing our job. And he's already testified here about the fact that there was a lot of work that needed to be done on the budget. He encouraged the staff to go back to their desks and focus on that. And one of the things that he said was that we needed to remember that we serve the administration of the day, whoever that is. And we are the link between the administration, and the stability of the department was the most important thing.
Mr. Chair, that is captured from page 27, paragraph 11 of the witness statement. Now, you go on from page 27, paragraph 12, to deal with the meeting with Minister van Rooyen and Mr. Mohammed Bobat at the Union building, but you do so first by dealing with how you met with Mr. Bobat. Can you please take us through those events?
I'm sorry, before she proceeds, can I take you back, Ms. Macanda, to the telephone conversation that the DG had with Minister van Rooyen on the morning of the 10th, where he put the minister on speakerphone and introduced you. You remember that? Yes.
Yes, I do, Chair.
Yeah. As I understand it, your evidence is that when Mr. Phumza suggested to Minister van Rooyen that the Treasury staff could prepare a statement, a media statement for the minister's approval. You say the minister said that there was already a statement. Is that right?
He said there was already a statement that had been prepared, and we did not need to worry about that.
Yes. What else transpired in that conversation, if you can remember? What else transpired in that conversation, if you can remember?
I think the DG already referred to his conversation with the minister in as far as the invitation to come to the office and perhaps meet with Minister Nene, who had come to the office that morning, and to clear his office. That was something else that came up in that conversation.
Yes. And what was the minister's attitude to that?
I did not find the minister's attitude to be that of listening and being welcoming to the request and the invitation that the DG was making.
Yes. And is there anything else of importance that the minister said to Mr. Fuzile that you can remember, that you can share with us?
Not that I recall specifically. No, not that I recall.
Did you form any view about whether the minister might have certain preconceived ideas about National Treasury based on the conversation?
I certainly did. As I said, the minister said to the DG in a manner that I found to be almost dismissive of the DG's suggestions. I came out of that conversation thinking this is going to be an interesting and perhaps tough working relationship for all of us.
Yes. I don't see in your statement something that Mr. Fuzile said. One of the things that Mr. Fuzile said, the minister said during that conversation, was that the minister said to him something along the lines that the National Treasury, or you people, or the National Treasury must I think must stop this tendency of issuing statements. I don't see anything like that in your statement. Is that because you did not hear it?
It's because I do not recall it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You were at the point where you were going to tell the chair about your first interaction with Mr. Bobat at the Union Building. You may proceed to do so.
So when I got to the Union Buildings,
I'm sorry again, and I may have missed this because Mr. Mkwena, you are now at or beyond paragraph 27, eh?
Paragraph 12, Mr. Chair.
Sorry?
Paragraph 12, 1-2.
Oh, that's fine. Then you may continue. I think I may be ahead of you. Thank you.
when I got to the Union Buildings, I asked the people from the presidency that were waiting for us. I introduced myself and told them that I was here for Minister van Rooyen. I had previously been invited the previous night to come to the Union Buildings for the swearing-in ceremony. And I asked them where I should go. They pointed me to a waiting room and told me that Minister van Rooyen would be coming and would be waiting there, and that's the room in which I would meet with him. While I was standing there waiting for Minister van Rooyen, I noticed the people from the presidency standing with this tall gentleman of Indian origin, and they pointed towards me. The gentleman then walked towards me, and he informed me that he was the advisor to the new minister. I did not think anything about that, and he introduced himself and he told me that his name was Mohammed Bobat.
During your telephone call that you related to the chairperson earlier on, did Minister van Rooyen indicate to you and the DG that he has already appointed advisors, or that he wanted the DG to assist him in appointing any advisors?
No, I do not. The minister did not say anything about having appointed advisors already. Conversation about advisors actually did not take place in that conversation with the DG.
Were you aware of any contracts that could have been concluded by the DG and any advisors on behalf of the minister?
I wouldn't say I was specifically aware at this time, but I was surprised that the minister who was just announced had already appointed advisors.
Right. There is Mr. Bobat coming to you now, introducing himself, and what happens thereafter?
So he came, he introduced himself, and he said to me, he asked me, what is your job? And I explained to him what my job was. And he says, are you the one who releases statements for National Treasury? And I responded in the affirmative. He then said to me, from now on, no statement goes out without my approval. Every statement must be approved by me and the minister. I was very puzzled and taken aback by this for two reasons. Firstly, he was a little aggressive with me. It was not that there were no pleasantries that were exchanged, but his manner was quite aggressive and almost hostile. It felt to me that it was important for him to assert his authority quite quickly with him. And also I was puzzled before, it just is part of practice and policy that every statement that goes out be approved by the minister and the DG. So that was not something that needed to be pointed out with me by someone who understands how the system works. I then said to him, yes, you know, every statement that goes out is approved by the minister. That is how we do things.
Did he tell you as to what his role was going to be as an advisor now that he was giving you instructions no longer to issue any statements?
He didn't explain to me what his role was. That discussion didn't come up. But he just told me that he was an advisor. And I must say, as I understood the role of advisor, I didn't understand it to include being part of approving statements. To the extent that they are advisors to the minister, they are privy to discussions, they weigh in, but certainly not in approving statements.
Now, during this interaction between yourself and Mr. Bobat, where was the DG?
At this point, the DG had not arrived. We had traveled separately to the union buildings. But at some point, it did arrive. So the DG was not witness to this exchange in my recollection.
Yes. And then you had your first interaction with the Minister van Rooyen. Can you tell the chairperson about that interaction or your meeting with him?
I then stepped into the room that we were told to wait in, and I was waiting there. And at some point, the minister did come. He arrived, and he arrived with his family. He left his family in the other room and then came to join us in the room. And in the room was myself, the DG, Mr. Bobat, and of course the minister. And once the minister arrived, the DG then once again spoke to the minister, and he spoke to the minister about events that had transpired at the Treasury that morning. He explained to minister that he addressed staff. He explained to minister, I summarized for the minister what it is that he said. And then he once again talked to the minister about the need for us to be releasing a statement as the Treasury, and explained that that was the reason I was there to assist with that specific task. And it was the second time that he was doing it, because I was bothering him. Even though I had heard the earlier conversation, I was worried, as I say, because the journalists were calling me. So I understood the importance of this. So he then explained to the minister once again about us talking and agreeing about releasing a statement.
Now, what was the minister's reaction to that?
The minister took out a piece of paper, and he gave it to the DG. The DG read the piece of paper. He gave it to me. I read the piece of paper. And in essence, what the piece of paper was an introduction of the minister. And generally, it was just an introduction to the minister, and one of the key messages that were in that statement was that he would open up access to the Treasury. After reading the statement, I felt that the statement lacked in the key messages that we needed to have in a statement that the DG had already explained to the minister. Key messages, for instance, that would talk about policy trajectory, policy stability, and the importance of the Treasury sticking to the fiscal targets and sticking to all of those policy that have been announced. This was the main thing that people were asking. What does this appointment mean for policy? Does it mean that, does it signal a change in policy? I then said to the minister, at that point, the DG was, it felt to me that he was in that meeting, but he wasn't there, because the interaction with the minister didn't yield fruit, but also it was very difficult. So I explained to the minister that the statement was a good start. I then offered to enhance it with the messaging that we use in the Treasury. I had brought with me some of the documents that we had previously published to assist in that regard. The minister was non-committal. He wouldn't give his approval for me to enhance the statement with the kind of messages that we had discussed with him.
Now, what I fail to understand is the following. During that meeting that you are now relating to the chairperson, was the minister aware of the adverse ramifications which resulted as a result, flowing from his appointment and the removal of Mr. Nene? I mean, that removal of Mr. Nene, the ramification to the economy itself, was he able to appreciate those factors at the time?
I cannot speak to his state of mind, but I can say that that was explained to him twice by the DG. First, in the telephone conversation that took place that morning, and secondly, while we were sitting there.
Was he aware of the fact that the rent was taking a knock at the time and there was a need for him to release a statement that would calm the market, or at least, give some assurance of his plans to deal with those severe economic factors?
That is exactly what the DG was explaining to him. He was explaining about the negative market reaction on the stock exchange and in the currency market, and in the he was explaining to him about the fact that we needed to assure the market. We needed to assure the market that the appointment was not a signal for policy change. And he was explaining to the minister all of these things while he was explaining why we needed to release a statement.
And you said that despite all that, the statement that he took out from his pocket did not even begin to address those issues?
No, it did not.
Now, on page 30, from paragraph 22 to 24 of your statement, you canvass what you refer to as the bizarre interaction between Mr. Bobat and Minister van Rooyen. Could you please share with us those events?
So at some point during the meeting, once we had moved from discussing the statement and not getting the approval that we were hoping for from the minister, Mr. Bobat said to the minister, "I called you. Why did you not return my call?" And his tone was the same authoritative one that he had used with me. It lacked the hostility that he had shown towards me earlier, but it certainly was contemptuous. I thought it was contemptuous. The minister then said, oh, I've been getting a lot of phone calls from people congratulating me. And the thing is, I don't have your number, so I could not return your call.
So the minister did not have the number of his own advisor?
That is what the minister said. I do not have your number, so I could not return your call.
Yes. And then what happened?
I was flabbergasted, to say the least. I quite was shocked, because I was thinking to myself, firstly, I was shocked by his manner towards the minister. As I say, he was quite contemptuous and he was quite dismissive. But also, one thing that I thought about was, if he doesn't have the number, then do these people know each other? And if they don't know each other, how does he become the minister's advisor?
Now, may I link that part of your evidence, if you may refer to page 58, and that is the witness statement of Mr. Fuzile. If you go to paragraph 18, simply to see that this is exactly what you also witnessed, he relayed that bizarre situation in different terms when he was told as to the new minister that he was going to get. He says that, I asked him to elaborate what he meant. He said I should watch it. My new minister is likely to come with advisors he does not know. So, Ms. Macanda, you also gained that impression at the time when you saw this interaction that the minister might not be knowing his own advisor, Mr. Bobat.
I certainly was left with the impression that they did not know each other, and if they did not know each other very well.
Now, you also did attend the swearing-in ceremony?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us about what transpired there?
So, the ceremony took place.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mkwena, I may have missed this. You did get her to confirm the last two sentences of paragraph 24.
Yes.
They are important. You did.
Yes, she testified on those things,
Oh,
Mr. Chair,
okay.
but for emphasis, she can still read paragraph 24 into a record on page 30.
Okay. But if she did, it's fine. I may have missed it, but I leave it to you if you wanted to emphasize. I
don't want to lose it, Chair. Rather, we err on the side of caution. I know that she have done it, but
Yeah.
turn to page 30,
Okay.
30, and if you may read paragraph 24 into the records.
What I was thinking was, these people do not know each other. If they don't know each other, how does Mr. Bobat becomes minister's advisor? I then witnessed Mr. Bobat and the minister exchanging phone numbers in our presence. I was left with the impression that they did not know each other.
And that's what we have canvassed earlier on.
And you are quite clear that you witnessed them exchanging their numbers.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you were just about to relate the swearing-in ceremony events. Your mic.
So at some point, the swearing-in ceremony started. The minister went into a different entrance. I went into the entrance and sat with the journalists, and the journalists were eager to interview the minister. They had been asking me whether the minister would grant interviews after his swearing-in ceremony. I had also explained this to the minister, that I was getting a lot of requests for interviews, and he explained to me that he would not be doing interviews at that
Now,
point.
up until that point, the minister has not as yet been interviewed by journalists.
No.
Okay, proceed.
The swearing-in ceremony went ahead, and after it was the minister, I should point out, the minister took out the piece of paper that he had given to myself and the DG to read. He took out the piece of paper. He read from the piece of paper after he was sworn in. And after the swearing-in ceremony, I followed the minister and the president as they were leaving in a different entrance. He gave me the piece of paper because I needed to take it back to the office and type it up so that we can release the statement.
And what happened to the piece of paper?
I'm sorry?
What happened to that piece of paper?
I do not know. Once I typed the statement, I probably disposed of it.
Yes.
But I typed up the statement because I didn't have an electronic copy, so I needed the hard copy.
May I refer you to page 40, Mr. Chair? It's annexure PM1. You can also relate it to PM2. Can you identify the document on page 40, PM1, and
Yes.
the purpose of that document?
So in page 41, it's a copy of the statement that I had typed up, that I then consulted with Mr. Bobat, as had been previously directed to, for the approval of the statement. In page 40, it is an email I sent to Mr. Bobat with the attachment of the statement, asking him to approve.
And the statement on page 41 is the statement which was issued by the minister at the time when you said that the markets were crazy and that the rent was tumbling.
Yes, it is.
And as you have said, that having read the statement, it does not even begin to address those fundamental economic concerns at the time.
No, the statement did not address the concerns.
Now, this statement, I take it that at some point it was published in the website.
Yes, the statement was published on the website once approved by Mr. Bobat.
How was the reaction locally and internationally about that statement?
The statement was benign in as far as addressing some of the concerns that had already been raised, and the reaction to it was really, in fact, some people were quite angry. And I recall receiving a phone call from one London-based analyst. His name is Peter Attard Montalto. At the time, he worked for Nomura International. And Peter said to me, "What the hell kind of statement is this? What are you guys saying here?" And I explained to Mr. Montalto that my job was to communicate on behalf of the Minister of Finance, and this statement was the communication from the Minister of Finance. He really expressed frustration, and he said, "You guys aren't saying anything here." And, you know, he then hung up on me.
Now, did you get any other reactions from a journalist after the statement was released?
I got a lot of reaction from journalists in terms of continuing to ask for interviews with the minister, one of whom was CNN, Eleni Giokos. She sent me email and she was phoning me constantly because she was saying, you know, we need to talk to the minister, we need to talk to the minister. But certainly not the kind of reaction where people were calmer after we released the statement because it addressed some of the concerns.
Yes. In your statement, you deal with Mr. Bobat and the manner in which he asserted his power. You do so by referring to an incident about a fake Twitter account. Can you please share with us as to what transpired between yourself and Mr. Bobat in that regard?
So by the time that the minister was sworn in, there was already a fake Twitter account that was created in his name. It was not our first experience with fake Twitter accounts. We had previously had such with Minister Nene, with the Deputy Minister of Finance, Mr. Mcebisi Jonas. And these fake Twitter accounts generally were used by people that wanted to swindle people out of their money. So what we would normally do as the Treasury, we would release an advisory to the public saying, this is a fake Twitter account, please be cautious and make sure that you are not taken in by the scams. So late on the evening of the 10th, I got a phone call from Mr. Bobat, and he was demanding that I deal with the Twitter account of the minister. And he said to me, I want you to close the account, and I want you to write a report for me in the morning. I want a report from you in the morning. Once again, I found his tone to be very aggressive. And I explained to Mr. Bobat that to be able to close an account, one would need to have the administrative login details of the account, which we didn't have because we didn't create the account. And I explained to him that we would not be able to close the account. The least that we can do is to alert the public to the fact that the account was fake. And you know, he was abusive, I felt, and intimidating. And I wrote him an email that evening, and I explained to him what I would do in the morning, and I explained to him also that I was on sick leave and I would not be coming into the office.
May I refer you to page 42, paragraph annexure PM3.
Yes.
Is that the email that you said you ultimately wrote to Mr. Bobat?
Yes, this is the email I wrote to Mr. Bobat.
And the contents, it's what you have already related to the chairperson as to what transpired?
Yes, they are.
Now, can you deal with the minutes, with the meeting of the 11th of December 2015? And before you do that, may I premise your evidence by asking you a few questions in order to place it into its proper context. That meeting, you said it took place on the 11th of December 2015. Am I correct?
Yes, the morning after. The morning after. It was a Friday. And
who arranged that meeting?
I received a call that morning from Mr. Malon Geswint, who was the chief of staff of Minister Nene. I was not planning to come to the office, so I imagine Malon arranged the meeting.
And do you know who else attended the meeting from your recollection?
So my recollection, Momo was there, Mr. Ismail Momoniat, who is the head of tax and tax policy at the National Treasury. I do recall Ms. Kay Brown, who was in the meeting. She was acting on behalf of Mr. Michael Sachs, who was the head of the budget office. Mr. Sachs was already on leave. I do recall Mr. Munale Ratsoma being in the meeting, and there was a list that was provided with people that were in the meeting. But in my recollection, I don't recall everyone there, but
yes,
these were the people that were in the meeting.
And the deputy minister at the time, Mr. Jonas, did he attend the meeting?
No, that was strange. He wasn't in the meeting.
You have recorded this meeting as one of the important meetings that you had to attend, and that is the reason you even had to cut short your sick leave to attend that meeting. Do you know why did the deputy minister not attend the meeting?
So I debated with myself about going to the office to attend the meeting, but I felt that I could not be absent in a meeting, the very first meeting that the Minister of Finance has with senior Treasury officials. So out of respect for the minister, I went to the office. I asked my brother to drive me to the office, and I went to the office. And the reason why I felt the meeting was important was because I thought that the minister was going to talk to us about what was important in his agenda. I thought he was going to talk to us about some of the budget processes, things that still needed to be concluded, so we would be able to table the budget in February. I thought the minister was going to talk to us about what his agenda was going to focus on in the short term, things that we need to know. So I went to the meeting with a pen and paper to take notes so that I get to understand what was important to the minister.
And you said that, but Mr. Jonas was not in that meeting.
No, the minister came in and the deputy minister wasn't there. And I found that to be very strange. In fact, I did not know whether the deputy minister was in the office or not. I had not seen him that morning before I went into the meeting.
All right. And then what happened during the meeting?
So the meeting started a little bit late, and the minister came in with two gentlemen, one of whom I recognize. I had previously been introduced to him the previous day, Mr. Bobat. Mm-hmm. He came into the meeting with Mr. Bobat and another gentleman I didn't recognize. And he then introduced the two gentlemen. And he introduced Ian Whitley as his chief of staff and Mr. Mohammed Bobat as his advisor. The minister said that he informed the meeting that whatever needed to come to his office had to go through his advisor and his chief of staff.
But what did you understand him to mean when he said that? That everything that had to happen must go through the chief of staff?
The minister did say that everything that we did had to be done with the approval of the two gentlemen. So what I understood him to mean was the introduction was important because these were the people that we would need to work with. These were the people that almost were in charge. So we needed to know who they were.
Did he say anything about the role of the DG as to what is going to happen with the role of the DG if now the two gentlemen are going to be in charge?
Not at that point, no.
Yes, then what happened in the meeting?
So after the minister introduced the two gentlemen, he then, sat back and was looking at Mr. Bobat as if to hand over the meeting to Mr. Bobat, at which point the DG said, okay, now wait a minute, hold on. And then the DG said, I think it is important that I introduce the people that I'm with. The manner of the DG was quite angry, I thought. And this was surprising to me because he's a very even-tempered man. I had got to know him as a very sober and even-tempered person. But in that meeting, he was quite angry. In fact, he was pointing his fingers towards the minister and his advisor and his advisors. And he then went around the room, introducing each and every person that was in the meeting and explaining what their role in the Treasury was. And then he said, he pointed his finger and said, here we do everything by the book. If I say to you, no, it's not going to be done, it's not because I don't like your face. It is because it is not right by regulations. If it is not according to the book, and the book that he was referring to was the minister's handbook, he said, if it is not according to the book, it is not going to be done. I found that exchange to be puzzling, as I say, because I didn't think there was something that had happened in this meeting that explained his angry reaction. So I surmised that it was almost as if I was witnessing Act 2 of a play without having seen Act 1, because he was angry.
Now, do you recall, if I take you back to the events of that meeting, do you recall how the minister introduced both Mr. Bobat and Mr. Whitley in terms of their titles or their portfolios that they're going to be holding at Treasury from that time?
I don't have a specific recollection of this, and I'm aware that the other witnesses have testified to the minister confusing the names. I have racked my brain trying to recall that memory.
Okay.
I don't have a recollection of that.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that. What is it that you don't recall?
I am saying that I am aware that other witnesses have testified that during the introduction, the minister confused the names of the advisors. That is not something specifically that I have a recollection of.
Okay, thank you.
And in that meeting, the minister did not proceed to deal with the economic situation or to give or outline his plan as to how was he going to address the negative impact on the rand and other important issues pertaining to economy.
No, not at all. Once he had done with his introductions, he was done, and he was signaling, handing over the minister to Mr. Bobat, and it almost seems that that was the conclusion of the meeting. At which point the minister said, "No, just hold on."
And you had a pen in the book. The book, I take it that it was still empty, nothing to record.
I had nothing to record. I had no notes to take because nothing of substance was discussed in the meeting.
You told the chair earlier on that Mr. Bobat was this person that was quite aggressive, going around issuing instructions. And in your statement, you relayed an incident whereby he even had to stop a recruitment process. Do you recall?
Yes, so after this meeting ended, the one that we had with the minister, Mr. Bobat had previously told me that he wanted to meet with me, and he said to me he wanted to discuss the communications unit. And I took with me the organogram of the communications unit and a few documents. And I was explaining to him the structure of the communications unit. My appointment as Chief Director of Communications in October had occasioned a vacancy for the position that I previously held. So I was explaining these things to Mr. Bobat, and I was explaining to him that we had just started with the recruitment process for the Director of Media Relations and Communications, at which point he said to me, no, you need to stop that. You need to stop that. And I said to him, why? And he said, we don't need to worry about that recruitment process. And I explained to Mr. Bobat that, he was having a conversation with the wrong person in this, because he needed to have this conversation with the Director General of the National Treasury and the Deputy Director General, who was responsible for corporate services. They would be the people that he could discuss it with.
Now, at the time when he said you must stop with the recruitment process, how far was the process itself?
I was appointed in October, so we had already advertised, and I think at this point we had closed the advertisements and we had received CVs. So the next step in the process would be for me to go through the CVs and do a shortlist. So that's the stage at which we're.
And despite all that, he said that you must stop the process.
He said no, you need to stop that.
And then what happened?
Well, as I say, I explained to him that I was not authorized to make that decision. That authority rested with the DG of National Treasury. But I also found the meeting very unusual, because my understanding of his role as advisor didn't include him being involved in the processes of the department, certainly not the HR processes of the department. So I was quite taken aback by what I thought was audacity on his part to be talking to me about how we should be running the HR process. And once I explained to him that he needed to discuss the matter with the DG, that was the end of the discussion.
Did you discuss this issue with the DG at the time?
I certainly did.
And what was his reaction?
He was angry. He was very angry.
Did he interact with do you know if he did interact with Mr. Bobat on this issue?
I don't know if he interacted with Bobat on that issue. I didn't spend a lot of time on the second floor, which is where the DG's office and the minister's office were. I spent most of my time in my office, so I was only there for meetings. So if there were any interactions, I did not see them.
You continue also in a statement, to deal in the manner in which Mr. Bobat was exercising his power and demonstrating that the new sheriff is now in town. You do so with relation to an incident pertaining to one official that had to surrender his office.
Yes, so I had to go up to the minister's office because one of the things that we were being asked was a full CV of the minister. We had posted a very short CV of the minister that included his qualifications and that included his work experience. And I was getting a lot of calls from people about Minister was the mayor of Merafong, and a lot of journalists wanted to know when and for how long was he mayor. And also people wanted to know the qualifications that he had listed. In which years were those qualifications obtained and from which institutions? So I was in the minister discussing this, and the minister asked me, why are people interested in my CV? And I had to explain to the minister why a CV of a Minister of Finance is important. And I explained to him that someone in that role is entrusted with a lot of powers. And because of that, people want to know what his experiences are, what his policy views are. And trust in the office of the Minister of Finance equals trust in government. So the minister took the CV and said, okay, I should wait outside of his office while he was going to fill in some of the blanks I had highlighted. While I was waiting outside the minister's office, I witnessed Mr. Bobat ordering Mr. Marlon Geswind to vacate his office. And he was saying to Minister, to Marlon, you need to leave, this is where I'm going to sit. And Marlon was explaining to him that no, this office is the office for the Chief of Staff, and the advisors sit on the other side. And it's quite a distance to go to where the advisors sit. And Mr. Bobat was saying, I need you out of this now, and this is where I'm going to sit. And he was also explaining that everyone needed to move because he needed to be situated as close to the minister as possible.
So, did you get the impression that Mr. Bobat was basically beginning to dictate the rules that would that he thought should be followed, after his arrival?
I certainly got that impression, Chair. I mean, in my interaction with him, I got the sense that he was ignorant of the rules, but he also was not interested in what the rules were. But even if the rules were there, he would disregard them and he would make new rules. Because I had explained to him when he was talking to me about stopping the recruitment process, I explained to him that I was not authorized to do that, but that was not important. He was not interested.
So, what you had already witnessed in regard to him was one, the first time he saw you, he told you that from then onwards, he would have to approve any media statement that you issued. Is that right?
Yes, he did.
And then he told you to stop the recruitment process as well.
Yes, he did.
And now he was being told where advisors to the minister, what offices advisors to the ministers use, and he was saying he was going to use another one.
Yes, he was telling people to move so that he can sit as close to the minister's office as possible.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, I take it that Treasury as a department had a recruitment policy. It must have had communication policy. It must have had other policies that governed Treasury, including, applicable pieces of legislation. Where was Mr. Bobat deriving his power from as an advisor?
I do not know. I do not know where Mr. Bobat derived his power from, but as I have previously testified, in the first 2 minutes that I met with him, he made it very clear that he had authority. Where he derived it from, I do not know.
And all this that you have related to the chairperson happened within a space of 2 days?
It happened in a space of, inside of 24 hours.
And Minister van Rooyen was the Minister of Finance for 2 days?
He was the minister for 4 days.
For 4 days?
Yes.
Chair, that concludes the evidence of Mr. Macanda, and I'm told that it's already passed to the tier adjournment.
Okay. But did you say that concludes
Yes.
her evidence? Oh, okay. Let me just ask her one or two questions. Firstly, Ms. Macanda, in case I forget, thank you for coming to the commission to give evidence about what you know happened and your understanding of what happened. Secondly, going back to the issue of Mr. van Rooyen introducing his advisor and his chief of staff, you have already said you have no recollection of him confusing their names or their roles, or confusing their roles or their names. Is that right?
That's right. I don't have a specific recollection of that.
Yes. How far were you sitting from, or I assume you were all sitting from where the minister was, more or less?
I was quite at the end of the table. So the table is big and round. The minister and his two gentlemen were at the head of the table, and the DG was next to them. I was at the far end, closer to the door.
Yes. And whereabout was the then DG, Mr. Phumza, in relation to the minister?
They were sitting very close to each other.
They were close to each other?
Yes.
And you were far, you say?
I was quite far.
Yes. And where was the current DG, Mr. Mohajane, in relation to the minister?
So the table is round. So it was the minister. It would have been possibly Mr. Bobat and Mr. Whitley. The DG was sitting here, and the other chair was taken by Mr. Momoniat, and Mr. Dondo was in the middle of...
Mr. Dondo Mahajane.
Sorry, Mr. Dondo Mohajane was much closer to the minister than I was.
Do you think that in the light of the position where you were, you may have not heard something that was said, or do you think that it was not said? I'm sorry. Do you think that the position where you were sitting in relation to where the minister was and where the then DG, Mr. Phumza, was, and the current DG was, do you think that distance may have disadvantaged you with the result that you might have missed something that where the minister said, or do you think that you you heard everything that was said by the minister?
It's possible that my position at the table would have disadvantaged me in that manner, but I think for me, it was because I was waiting for the actual meeting to start. For me, the most important thing that I was waiting for there was the part where the minister would start talking to us about his agenda and the important things.
Yes. Okay, so you are not in a position to say the confusion didn't happen. You are simply saying you did not hear it, and maybe the distance that the position where you sit may have affected that. That's all you are saying. Yes,
I'm saying I did not hear it.
Yes, yes. No, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, just one question. Ms. Macanda, you said that you are a qualified journalist.
Yes.
Now, at the time when the journalist wanted to know about the qualifications of the minister, did you yourself, take an initiative to verify the qualifications of the minister?
So, verify, perhaps I wouldn't say I took time to verify, but what I had asked for to be done by people in the communications unit was to source what we could find on Google, so that we could have an interim sort of CV on the website, because that is the thing that people were interested in. They wanted to know who he was, where he came from, and in the media he was being referred to as a as a backbencher. So I had done that, but we really needed a much more extensive CV that listed his experience, his background, and help people form views about what kind of a person and what kind of a finance minister he would make.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. From your statement, I think I got the impression that there is something else that you would like to share with the Commission, but which might not have been considered necessary to include at this stage of the hearing. I just want to assure you that we are interested in hearing whatever else you may have that would help us understand what was happening in terms of other matters, and if the Commission's legal team hasn't already taken a statement that covers other matters, they will be doing so soon, because anything that relates to what we are investigating that you might have information on will be important. So you will be contacted in due course then with a view to either the obtaining of that statement, and ultimately you would be asked to come back. So, but thank you very much for coming, and I'm sure we will see you again. Thank you very much. You are excused. Thank you. We will take the short adjournment now and resume at 22:12. We adjourn.
All right.
Mr. Maleka.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Manyi.
Good morning, Mr. Manyi. Thank you. Are you ready?
Hopefully.
No. Should you be sworn in now?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, Registrar, please do that.
Please state your full names for the record.
Mzwanele Manyi.
Do you have any objection with taking the prescribed oath?
No, I don't.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes, I do.
Do you swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Maleka.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Manyi, good morning once again.
Aye.
You recall that at the end of your testimony on the 14th of November 2016, through the Commission's attorney, the legal team addressed a letter to you dated 15 November 2018. You recall that?
Yes, I do.
And you would remember that in that letter, the Commission's legal team set out a number of topics that it intended to raise with you in the course of the resumption of your testimony this morning, correct?
Yeah, I can confirm that.
Mr. Manyi, it looks like if you keep yours on, there would be no problem. Your mic on, there would be no problem.
And you will recall also that after receipt of that letter, the Commission's attorney sent through to you a bundle of documents which comprises some material that the legal team would like to raise with you this morning. You received that bundle, I take it?
Yes, I got the bundle.
Yes. And you were invited to include whatever information that you in turn would have wanted to raise this morning, correct?
Yes.
And you did so?
Yes, I did.
And that bundle is now before you, and Chair, a copy has been transmitted to you in the course of Friday. And may I remind you where it should be, and with your permission, admit it as an exhibit. You will recall that, Mr.
Well,
Manyi.
before that, Mr. Maleka, you say it was transmitted to me on Friday. I don't know anything about that. I did not receive anything on Friday, did not receive anything over the weekend. I see there is a bundle here,
Yes.
which I'm seeing for the first time. I'm told by my registrar that she was only told during Ms. Macanda's evidence this morning that I was going to need Exhibit M,
Yes, Chair.
and she made arrangements, or arrangements were made for me to use this Exhibit M, but we had not brought it.
Chair, first of all, thanks that you now have before you Exhibit M. And you recall that that's the bundle on the strength of which Mr. Manyi testified previously on the 14th of November. And that will be the bundle that I would canvass with him with reference to his version to Ms. Williams' evidence. I'll get to it in a moment. But what we did, following upon the letter that Mr. Manyi confirms he has received, was to prepare a bundle of documents, and we have now labeled that bundle as Exhibit M1 to follow sequentially from Exhibit M. I have asked my colleagues to mark yours on the spine as Exhibit M1. Oh, Chair, can I ask?
Well, the one that is here is not marked M1 on the spine.
May I
It is
kindly ask?
written, just to make sure that it's the right thing, it's written secondary evidence bundle of Mr. Mzwanele Manyi.
Indeed, indeed. May
Are
I
you
propose
asking
that
that,
it be marked Exhibit M1
Okay.
so that when the time comes to begin to write submissions, we know where to find it?
This bundle which at pages 1 to 3 thereof reflects, according to the Index Auditor General report to Parliament on the financial statements and performance information of vote number 7, government communications and information systems. The bundle that has got that will be marked Exhibit M for Mary 1.
I'm indebted to you, Chair.
Thank you. Is the witnesses one already marked?
Yes, I understand from my colleagues that it has been marked. And just to confirm, Mr. Manyi, before you will have two bundles. The one is Exhibit M, which includes your statements that you previously canvassed on the 14th of November 2018, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And the second bundle will be the one that includes documents previously made available to you, which has been marked Exhibit M1 at the back of it.
Yeah.
Chair, I think that underlines the data set that we will be dealing with. Mr. Manyi, before I leave the identification of the data set, can I confirm with you that you have now prepared yourself on the topics that we identified in the letter to you that we would like to raise with you, and you're quite comfortable that we should raise those questions with you, correct?
Yeah, Chairperson, I am so ready such that because I also am not assisted by any legal representative. So therefore, Chairperson, I'll seek your indulgence, Chairperson, that I'm allowed to go through my statement as I've prepared it, and then so that I can, because I have been given these documents, these questions, I can go through these questions in my own approach, and then thereafter, Mr. Maleka is free to ask any question in ever shape or form. But I request, Chairperson, that I'm allowed to table my statement because I do have the questions and I have prepared answers, and I request that I get given the opportunity. It's only a short statement, Chairperson, it's only about 5 pages, that I go through my statement. I'm not going to read word for word. I'll go through my statement, and I'm sure I'll be answering a lot of his questions so that he can then ask those that are outstanding.
Okay, let me make sure I understand what you are saying. Mr. Malega was asking you the question whether you are ready for him to ask you any questions on the topics that they have indicated to you. And then in your response, you said you would like me to give you an opportunity to present your statement, and then after that, he can ask you any questions. Now, let me ask first, in regard to whether you are ready to answer any questions that Mr. Malega might put to you on the topics that you have been notified about. Is your answer that you are ready, but you would like that before that happens, you be afforded an opportunity to talk to your statement, as it were? You are not going to read everything, but to just talk on what you want to present without being asked questions as yet, and after that you can be asked questions. Is that what you are saying?
Not precisely, Chair. What I'm asking is that because the Commission has been very kind enough to give me the areas of questions, I've prepared my statement in line with those areas of questions. So I'm requesting to have a first bite at giving the answers to those questions. And if it turns out that there are some inadequacies anywhere, Mr. Malega is free to fill in the gaps and probe some more. But I think in that way, Chairperson, there will be much more benefit for the Commission, because I've sequenced, because what I've seen happening here, you get from page 5 to page 20 to page, it gets very disorienting, Chairperson. So in order for me to have a proper flow, I'm requesting that I get given the opportunity to table the answers in the form of the statement, which I already contained in my statement. I think in that way it will really assist.
Well, Mr. Malega, I don't know if you have any problem with that.
Not at all, Chair, as long
Not
as
at
he
all.
identifies
Yes, yes.
where we get the statement in the bundle.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Manyi.
Thank you, Chair.
I'll allow you to do that.
Okay, Chairperson. Thank you. So the first question, Chairperson, related to me being a GCIS, how did it happen, and all of that. And the straight answer to the Chairperson is that my going into GCIS was from the Department of Labor. It was actually a transfer. That's a formal categorization of how I went there. It's a transfer. And when a transfer happens, some of the questions that Mr. Malega has asked don't arise. For instance, he has asked a question about whether was I interviewed. Those questions don't arise, Chairperson. When you get in transfer, they arise when you get appointed. Then there's assessment and all of this. But I was already in the public service, so that question does not arise. I was transferred. In fact, I've tried to assist the Chairperson, Mr. Malega, in terms of how does that happen in the first place. Chairperson, I've got Exhibit 1 here, which Mr. Malega will find on on page 227 and page 228 in his bundle.
Is that
bundle
now of
M1.
Exhibit M1? Yeah,
Yes,
okay,
yes.
thank
Yeah,
you.
on page 227 and 228 is a Public Service Act. I just took extracts there, Chairperson, of just 2 pages, just a cover page of the Act and the actual paragraph, which is section 12, subsection 3, paragraph A, which reads that the President may transfer the head of a national department or national government component before or at the expiry of his or her term or extended term to perform functions in a similar or any other capacity in a national department or national government component in a post of equal, higher or lower grading or additional to the establishment as the President considers appropriate. So that is the section I trust, Chair, regularizes my appointment. And on top of that, Chairperson, on your bundle, page 229, I've got Exhibit 2, which is actually my letter of transfer. So everything was done according to the book, Chairperson. And then I move on to my time at GCIS. One of the things that was asked was the issue around, I think the issues around the bid adjudication committee. So what I've then done, Chairperson, is that on Exhibit 3.
Are you comfortable if I ask you about this letter before you proceed?
Oh, yeah.
Or would you prefer to proceed and finish first?
Yes,
You are comfortable?
Yes, Chairperson.
Okay. I see that that letter is dated 22 February 2010, am I right?
That's correct, Chairperson, 2011.
Oh, it's 2011, not
Yes.
2010. Was it signed before you assumed duty at GCIS, or did it come afterwards?
It came afterwards, Chairperson.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, you may proceed.
Okay, right. Okay, so one of the questions that I need to answer, Chairperson, is on Exhibit 3, which talks to, I think it's probably a follow-up, but Mr. Maleka will then probe some more. It's just an Exhibit 3, Chairperson, in terms of the financial delegations, the one that still responds to the issue of me saying that I did not say I wanted to sign off everything. I wanted to sign off that which was 500,000 and above. And that was in the financial delegation. So I just took one page of the financial delegation, Chairperson. It's on your bundle, page 230. That's where it is. It's just one page. There's something written there at the bottom about concurrence with the CEO prior to finalization. That is when things are above 500,000. So, so that's one, Chair. And then there was a question about...
Well, I'm sorry. For what it's worth, because you, in terms of the record, you have mentioned your names as Mzwanele Manyi,
Yes.
and didn't mention any other name. Shall we confirm that the name that is used there at 230, that refers to you?
Yes, Chairperson, it's my slave name.
I just want to make sure that whoever reads the record knows that it's the same as the witness that is referred to here.
No, that's correct, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, as part of the decolonization exercise, I'm trying to be African. Yeah. So yes, Chairperson. So then the next issue was the issue around, I'm saying here, media buying and interactions with other departments was done at chief director level. We used a system there, which we call TELMA, to determine where to place adverts. GCIS sits with the most objective tool in deciding where adverts should be placed. Departments, via their heads of communication, would approve the placements. Sometimes they would actually even defy advice from GCIS. Then I make a point, Chairperson, that the issue of media diversity was at the center of GCIS communication strategy. It was so much at the center that GCIS even had a subsidiary called MDDA, run by a very able cadre, Mr. Lumkomtinde, at the time. MDDA is Media Development and Diversity Agency. The brief of this agency was to ensure that government is assisting in terms of developing other platforms of communication. Government does not want a monologue. Government wants to make sure that all the voices of everyone in South Africa are heard, as it were. So that is the posture of government. So within media diversity, there are two groups of companies or two groups of media groupings that we will find there, covered within the Act. There's, in fact, an Act on this matter, MDDA Act as well. So, but there are two groups of media that you find. There's what is called community media, and there's also what is called small media, commercial small media. So those are the two groups of media that are covered within the Act. So in my view, Chairperson, when the issue of the new age came about, it was a very welcome development because it fitted in very well with what government was trying to do. Government had a proper infrastructure of even helping the development of these agents, of these companies. So when this one came on its own, not even with the assistance, the direct assistance of government in there, so I thought, well, this is a very welcome move. And in particular, the TNA, the New Age, brought in a different editorial slant, Chairperson, which was decidedly not hostile to government, which was very important because at the time, government was suffering from a serious media onslaught generally. And the challenge that the government has had is to say to media, we're not saying try to be nice to government, but try and be balanced in your reporting. But it looked like, Chairperson, the posture of mainstream media is that when you do something right, the attitude is that you get paid to do it in any way. They wait until you do something wrong, then they headline with that. Now, the posture of TNA was the complete opposite. It was a posture of saying the glass is half full as opposed to the glass is half empty. That was the posture of this. So it was a very welcome posture, as it were. And also, even price-wise, it was not the most expensive in terms of the ads for the same amount of square centimeters in that page, whether it's a half a page ad or full page ad. They were still much more competitive than others. Now, Chairperson, one of the exhibits which I did not submit because I did my research late, I don't know if the registrar can give this to the chair.
I got a copy for Mr. Malega.
Okay, I only have 2 copies here, Chairperson. I want to read on the one.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, unfortunately. Now,
Let me have a look first, then I'll
Okay.
get the registrar to give it to Mr. Malega.
if
Just give it to
Chairperson, you can, the particular page I wanted to look down to
Yes,
ask is the second last page that starts with, that's the concept. The page before that one, that starts with that's the
Yes.
concept. Now, as you are browsing through this, Chairperson, this is a letter written by Ms. Phumza Williams on the same subject of New Age. And she was responding to a journalist here called Ranjeni Munsami. So Ranjeni had raised a very interesting issue about that these breakfasts are elitist. They deprive people an opportunity to come to this elaborate breakfast and so on, and why is GCIS involved in this breakfast? Now, and Ms. Williams was here last time arguing that she was being pressured to support this breakfast and all of that. That was her posture. But this is a letter, Chairperson, that I think we must thank Ms. Ranjeni Munusami that she had made this letter public. This is from the website, Daily Maverick, dated 6th of February 2013. Now, just to read just a couple of paragraphs on this, Chair, for the benefit of those that don't have this copy. This is an extract from the letter of Ms. Phumza Williams responding to the issue of GCIS being involved in breakfast. And
Okay, 1 second. Registrar, give this to Mr. Malega. Mr. Malega, do you want us to mark it in any way at this stage or maybe later?
Chair, can we take the liberty of marking it in due course?
Okay. Okay, okay.
And we will distribute copies later.
Okay, all right. The concern is simply that he has given some evidence about it on record, and whoever reads the transcript won't at that stage know where to find it. But maybe we might not have an option.
Can I propose that it comes at the end of Exhibit M1,
Yes.
and then it will begin at page 281.
Okay, all right.
I will take the liberty of
Yes.
paginating it.
Paginating it,
Yes.
yeah. So it won't be a separate exhibit, it will just be put at the end of the existing bundle, Exhibit M1 already, and then all that will happen is that it will be paginated.
Indeed, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, you may
Okay,
continue,
thank
Mr.
you, Chair.
Manyi.
So in addition to what I've said, Chairperson, this is what Ms. Phumza Williams said in February 2013, and I must underline, Chair, but at that time I was not even in the public, I was not in GCIS at the time. But this is how she responded here without my help, that thus the concept of the New Age breakfast meeting was one which appealed to government as it presented the best of both worlds. She says government leaders could interact with the audience in attendance and at the same time reach millions of viewers watching on television. She says as a platform, it allows government to speak directly to a variety of stakeholders such as business people, thought leaders, and of course the people of South Africa. And she says it allows the audience to engage directly with government leaders, to probe them and obtain a deeper understanding of policies and programs. At the same time, the television audience has the opportunity to hear firsthand about issues which often directly affect them. Ms. Munusami, in the article, gives an impression that government ministers and the president do not use platforms available to them from SABC and so on. The New Age / Morning Live platform is one of the platforms available that government uses to communicate with citizens. Ms. Munusami conveniently chose to forget that the president, following the State of the Nation address, has an SABC interview where he further elaborates on his message. This platform complements a suite of other platforms that are used by government to communicate with its citizens, and no preferential treatment is given to any platform whatsoever. At the end of the day, on the next page, just a short paragraph there, Chair, if you indulge me. At the end of the day, an informed citizenry is good for democracy, and we will continue to strive to engage with people on every available platform. We are fully aware that no single platform can reach every person. Therefore, we will continue engaging face-to-face via all media channels in Parliament and every other available platform. The government communication system is a well-functioning system with its own weaknesses and successes. The battle of ideas in a contested society such as ours cannot be won only through one platform, but by use of all available to our citizens. So that was Ms. Williams, Chairperson, responding basically to the question that Mr. Malega is posing here by way of why this breakfast and so on. Say more about this breakfast, explain more. So this is the context, and I differ with Ms. Williams on a lot of things, but on this one, we are together. There it is, Chairperson.
I thought there was a point you were seeking to make in regard to the article maybe reflecting something different from what he may have told the Commission. Not really, that's not your point.
Well, it's actually also the point, Chairperson, because I think in the Commission, she had come here basically with a posture that is opposite to what is being said here. And her posture, Chairperson, was one that said, it's the one that was not understanding what she seems to be fully conversant with here and all that. And yeah, and her doing it last time, it was more like, I mean, she used the word that she was being bullied into doing this thing. But if I read this article here, like I've just done, Chairperson, we can see that this is a person that believed in this thing. So this is why it's quite strange how Ms. Williams operates, that on the one side she says this and the next time says something completely opposite, which is, without belaboring the point, Chairperson, we've dealt with the SMS matter, which was my also surprise, because the last time I left GCIS, we were on very good terms. There were no issues at all. That's why I was comfortable to talk to her. And then before I knew, it was a 180-degree turn in her attitude. So I just don't know what actually is happening in her space, that she goes left, she goes right, she goes left, she goes right. But anyway, this is what she said.
Yes, that article, would it be an article that she would have written as part of her official duties, or would it be an article that she may have just decided to write at a personal level? Or are you not able to tell?
No, I'm able to tell, Chairperson. In fact, I just want to read just a cover page of this article. It says, in an early article, Ranjeni Munsami criticized what she termed the elitism of government communication in South Africa, where only a select few who could afford it were privy to crucial information about our democracy, as well as a non-performance by a 429 million rand a year GCIS. Unsurprisingly, the GCIS disagrees. In the interest of broader debate, we publish a letter by Ms. Phumza Williams, acting GCIS CEO in its entirety. So Chairperson, she was acting here as, this letter was written in her capacity as acting GCIS CEO, responding to the query about the use of New Age and so on, and this breakfast. So the whole question about breakfast.
Well, you see, the reason why I was asking whether she may have written in her personal capacity or official capacity is this, that is it not possible that insofar as as long as she was writing in her official capacity as acting CEO of GCIS, she was supposed to reflect the government's position as opposed to her personal view, and maybe on another occasion she might have been expressing her personal views.
No, Chairperson, I think okay, I hear you, Chairperson. There's nothing personal here, Chairperson. This is the position of the department. I think this is why it is complemented by what I've said. In my statement here, I've said that the emergence of the New Age was a welcome development. So this backs it up. So this was our position, Chairperson. We wanted diversity, we wanted a multiplicity of voices.
But you understand the point I'm making, and I'm making it as whether there's a possibility, namely, if I speak as Deputy Chief Justice of the Republic in regard to certain matters at an official occasion, I might not include my personal views. I might speak on the official position of the judiciary. But maybe if I am speaking on another occasion when, for example, I might no longer be Deputy Chief Justice, it may well be that I might then say, well, that was the official position that I had to convey because I was speaking in that capacity. Now I'm no longer a Deputy Chief Justice, and if you want my personal view, this is my personal view.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Chairperson, I think I hear you, but let me just read just first opening paragraph to contextualize what capacity she was speaking on. The first paragraph, she says, in her column in the Daily Maverick on the 1st of February 2013, Ranjeni Munusamy erroneously attempts to paint a picture that the government communication and information system does not adequately fulfill its mandate of communicating with the public about government policies, plans, programs, and achievements. This assumption is flawed on a number of levels. Firstly, government has a responsibility to reach every citizen. Then she carries on. So, Chairperson, this is clearly somebody articulating a government position.
Well, that's all the more reason why I keep on going back to the question, because I thought to the extent that she may be expressing government position that might detract from the force that your point might have had if he said something else at a time when she was required to, speak her views, under oath, and not necessarily government's position or attitude.
Okay.
You understand?
I understand, Chairperson.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I think this here is more government position.
Government position.
Her statement under oath is probably her personal
Might be
position.
something else, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. So, Chairperson, there was also some question of whether I would have encouraged any DG or anybody to have used the new age. Almost definitely, Chairperson, I would have encouraged everyone I could come across because this was actually assisting in the government's approach of multiplicity of voices. So if anyone was to come here and say, Manyi encouraged me, I'm not going to create war to deny any of that because chances are that I might have and so on. Although I might not remember the specifics, but it's something that generally I would do because I thought it's the right thing to do. What I also liked about the New Age is that what they did, Chairperson, is that the creativity and the innovation of reporting per province. So what you would find in that publication is that at one sitting, you could say, okay, let me check what's happening in Northwest, and then to get a sense of what's happening in Northwest. What is happening in Mpumalanga? What is happening, the different provinces? So it had that. So it was a very useful publication and all that. And I think also for government, it would have been very useful because government generally has a problem in having its messages carried across because media, mainstream media takes the posture that says they are not a conveyor belt for government. They are the watchdog. This is the approach they take, that they are the watchdog. Now, government has invested in a lot of equipment, hoping in various press places. I mean, if you go to GCIS in Pretoria, go to GCIS in Cape Town, a lot of money has been spent by government to ensure that they use media as a partner in its communication. But media is not of the same mind. Media is there to say, what wrong are you doing? They are there with a red pen. In fact, when you go to a press briefing, you can go there, Chairperson, and read 10 pages and all that. And the very first questions that come after that press briefing is not anything about what you've written. It's the things that they came to the briefing with. It's an opportunity for them to ask all these other questions. So as a result, when you look at the newspaper the next day, you'd be lucky to find one sentence of what you had read reflected in there. So when you have a paper like the New Age, which has a different posture in terms of half the glass is half full, it was a very welcome posture. And not that, by the way, Chairperson, it did not reflect some of the wrong things that were happening in government, which I will take the Chairperson through, just to illustrate that this paper was indeed balanced in its approach. Now, one of the things, for instance, that would be used against this paper, Chairperson, would be that it's not a member of the ABC Audit Bureau of Circulation. So what this means, Chairperson, is that the big four in the media space, your Times Media, your what's now called Diso Blackstar, your Independent, what's the other one, Naspers and Caxton, the 4 big groups. They have this thing called the Audit Bureau of Circulation, where they audit how much of the newspapers have been printed and have been circulated, sold, and all of that. And then based on that, then they come up with a number through that audit process to say this newspaper has got a circulation of 100,000. And that circulation figure then gives a basis for the rate card. So in other words, the rate card is a pricing mechanism to say, do I price this half a page this much? Do I price a full page this much? And so on, based on the reach that newspaper would have, and that then that determines how much should an ad cost, as it were. So that's what they would use. Now, the New Age was not part of that, deliberately so, because they didn't believe that that system was a welcoming system. It was the view of the New Age editors at the time that, in fact, this thing was also conflict, because riddled with conflict, because all the people that sat on the board of this thing were all from, it's almost like a cabal of the same newspapers sitting here and deciding that, okay, you have this much, you have this much, and all that. And that determines the price of an ad. Now, this ABC thing, Chairperson, was also used, if you like, as a mechanism, as artificial barriers to entry. So community media would not make the criteria required to be in this ABC and all that. So what that does then is that if as community media or as New Age, you go to a private sector company to try and get them to put ads in your paper, the first thing they ask you is your ABC. And if you don't have that ABC, they can't do business with you. So this has been the problem. So at the time when I was at GCIS, it was not a be-all and end-all to have ABC. So we would use community media deliberately so, knowing they haven't got ABC ratings, but because there are other ways of checking this. For instance, the New Age was using audit to say auditors must audit how many papers they are circulating. But it was not the approach of New Age in any case to look at circulation. Their approach was based on what they called readership. And the philosophy here, Chairperson, is that with readership, for instance, if there's a family of 5, not all 5 members of the family must buy a particular newspaper. One newspaper is enough maybe for the entire household, as it were. So New Age was using that kind of a system to say, how many households are there? How many people are in a household? So if we sold one newspaper, that newspaper will be read by 10 people, as an example. So that's a kind of philosophy they were using in terms of saying, what is the reach of their publication?
But how would they know how many people they were able to reach, namely how many members of a family had read a newspaper if they didn't know how many newspapers they sold?
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. It's a very important question. Stats SA.
So in other words, it seems to me that you have got to first know how many newspapers you have sold, then before you can then say, but how many people do we reach? Because just because one paper is bought by one person doesn't mean necessarily that it will be read by that one person only.
Yeah, Chair, thank you, Chairperson. That's correct, Chairperson. That's how, I did say earlier, there's an issue of audit. So there'll be an auditor that would audit how many papers have been sold, so to speak, sent, because they used different models of distributing the paper, or rather selling the paper. The one model was the retail model, where you would go and sell like at the street corners and all of that. But the other model was subscription-based. So say this particular government department, as an example, requires 100 copies. So it's very clear, 100 copies go to Mpumalanga, 1,000 copies go to wherever. So there will be some subscription-based, and the subscription-based was in fact the lion's share in terms of the revenue streams, because those were guaranteed and all that. So there'll be all clear arrangements with various departments to say, or various government departments to say, I require so many newspapers and all that. So that would be one firm way of establishing exactly how many newspapers would be out. And then you multiply that also by a factor of how many people are in that government department. And in fact, some of those people will take the paper home. And the Stats SA is very meticulous, Chairperson, about the number of people in a household. So that information is readily available. In the Telma system, all of those nitty-gritties are also in there, just to get to know the reach of the paper and all that. But the important thing, Chairperson, on this matter is that the GCIS, rather, beg your pardon, the TNA approach was a lot more scientifically sound than the ABC in this way. One of the newspapers in this country that has got the biggest circulation is, Daily Sun. Now, the Daily Sun probably trumps everybody in terms of how many newspapers it circulates. But what ABC does not seem to take into account is something called psychographics, because it's all well and good to say my paper has gone to a million people. But what are the psychographics of those people? Can you take an analysis of a judgment, Chairperson, and put it on a Daily Sun and hope that the Daily Sun market is going to read that? They wouldn't. It's not their cup of tea. They're interested in other things, as it were. So therefore, the TNA approach was much more targeted as well, and therefore the issue of what you call spillage was less in TNA. So with these others, there's a lot of spillage. I mean, if I live in Northern Cape and one copy of a Sowetan is identical from the one side, from Limpopo to Cape Town is an identical copy of the Sowetan. I mean, that blunt approach, how much value does it add to somebody sitting in Postmasburg and so on? You'll find that there's nothing in Postmasburg covered in Sowetan. In fact, I can even bet even today, if you were to open Sowetan today, Chairperson, I'm almost sure there's not much covered in Postmasburg. But if you had the new age, you would have a focus on Northern Cape, we did focus on this and all of that. And what that does, it helps even government in those regions to know what are the issues affecting people in the various localities. So instead of buying one paper that is just blunt, that is just covering Gauteng issues, and maybe something in Cape Town and Durban, and so on, but the rest of the country is almost non-existent as it were in terms of the coverage. So that is what New Age did, and that's why this ABC was actually not meaningful. In fact, Chairperson, I think government should be wary of insisting, because I know here of lately they're insisting on this as well. This is part of the capture of government by the newspapers. Newspapers actually have captured government, because government is now also almost insisting on ABC, which I think is a mistake because it's anti-developmental. You can't have a situation where government is going to insist on this thing, because this is an artificial barrier to entry. New players are not able to go into this. New players will not have a rate card that recognizes them. So it's a real big mistake. So I would really be encouraging government not to be using ABC. They can use it, but they must not exclude those that don't have it, and all of that, Chairperson. So that's that one. To proceed, Chairperson, then there's the issue of cost and the subtext of how much we paid. And Chairperson, as I go through this, I'm going to ask the registrar. I don't know if we've got equipment here to be able to put and flag this. Just one slide.
Well, Mr. Malega, are you able to be of assistance to Mr. Manyi in regard to slides?
Chair, I am technologically challenged, but what was indicated as a short statement has gone for far too long now.
Well, but in terms of assisting him up with slides, you say you are technologically challenged?
Yes, we can make those arrangements
for later.
During the lunch adjournment.
Okay, Mr. Manyi,
Okay.
so that can be dealt with later.
Okay, Chairperson. It's just one slide, by the way.
Yes.
I wanted to show
Okay.
in terms of the costings. Now,
Well, before you say, well, Mr. Malega, you kind of complained that what was intended as a short statement has taken long. It's fine. I have asked Mr. Manyi some questions. Let's allow him to complete. Thank you.
thank you, Chair. Thank you for the protection, Chair. Now, Chairperson, I had put a slide here. It's a pity that the Chairperson does not have the copy of this here. And I see also the printouts here are not as clear, but my copy is much clearer, that I wish I could even share it with the Chairperson.
I thought Mr. Malega said that you had sent to them documents that you wanted to use.
Yes, I have.
Which were included here. But there was the earlier one which doesn't appear to have been included. Is that another one? That was
No,
not included?
this one is actually
That one is
part of the
included.
statement. This one
Oh, okay.
on page it's in the statement. This one, Chairperson, on Exhibit 4 and 5, page 231 and to 235, 236 to 240.
231 to 236.
231, yes, Chairperson, from 231.
Okay, all right. Yes, you may proceed then.
Yeah. What I'm showing there, Chairperson, is that financial year 2011-2012. Because sometimes when we deal with the TNA, we deal with it out of context. So I thought it's important that we must deal with it in
TNA
context.
being the new age.
The
just
new
to
age, yes,
refresh
Chairperson.
yeah.
I think it's important that we deal with it in context. Now, on Exhibit Q4, Chairperson, which will be there on page 231 to 235, there's a whole list in those exhibits, Chairperson, from 231 to 235 of all the media that was ever paid in GCIS in 2011-2012, which was my period. So the total bill for the year was like 194 million. That's how much GCIS paid in the year 2011-2012. So I'm going to deal with the 2 years that I was there, 2011-2012 and 2012-2013. So the first bit.
I'm sorry, Mr. Manyi. You have just mentioned the total.
Yes, Chairperson.
Whereabout is it? Is it on page 231?
On my actual statement, one I'm reading now, Chairperson, on 231, that will be a list of, there's a total at the top and the breakdown.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm just talking to that.
Or the amount at the top is the total.
It's a total, that 194.
Involving all publications.
Of all the publications.
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
So then
And
the total is 194 million.
That's 199,132.58. Is that right?
It's 194,169,477.96.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Are you looking at the first column? I'm looking at the second one. No, now I know where you are.
Have you got it, Chairperson?
Now
Okay.
I know where you are here.
Right.
That's fine.
So that is the global amount in terms of total spend on media by GCIS in the year 2011-2012. So the amount there is 194,169,477.96. That's the global amount.
And I assume that the reference to 2011 /2012 refers to the financial year, government
Yes,
financial year.
Yeah, financial year, yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's a financial year. Okay, so just on a high level, Chairperson, then on my statement, which I'm reading now,
Before you go to your statement, the column, if I may call it that, where the total appears, which you have told me about, is at the top, and then below that there is another column. Is that the one where you say, is that the one that you say reflects the breakdown of the various publications?
Yeah, okay, let me explain this, what you see in front of you, Chair. What you see right at the top, you see 2011/2012 financial year ad spend, right at the top. And the number there is 194,169,477.96. That's right at the top.
Yes.
And then there's the next line is 2012-2013, and then 2013-2014 there's a blank because I was not there.
Yes.
Now, then you get this other table at the bottom, supplier total ad spend. That 199 that the chair read is just for that one company called AdReach. It's just the one company.
Yeah.
Then the next one there is Ad24, which is Naspers at 17 million. So that's the one. So what I've then done, Chairperson, so that there's about 5 pages of this spreadsheet that shows exactly which company was paid how much. Now, what I've then done, Chairperson, is just to take just the ones that constitute the lion's share, and put only those on my statement, just to say, of this 194, here were the big hitters of that, because the others are just sharing the spoils.
Yes.
Yes. So in terms of that, then, Chairperson, in the year 2011-2012, SABC was paid 68,889,851.50. That's how much was paid just to SABC.
Yes.
Followed by, just in terms of magnitudes, followed by Ads24. Ads24 is a marketing arm of Naspers. It's your City Press, Rapport, all of that group, Chairperson. That group got 17,995,122.27. That's what that group got. And then we've got Avusa at the time, which is now Tiso Blackstar, which is where we are here today in this building. Those people in that year, they got 11,219,856.86 cents. And then there was ETV. ETV got 8,517,788.36 cents. And then you get the New Age. And the New Age got 8,691,634.86 cents. So that's how the lay of the land was, Chairperson. And then if you compute that, you then say, what is the percentage of the New Age in this whole lot? The actual percentage, Chairperson, if you work out a ratio between the 8 million and the 194, is actually 4.5%. Okay, so of the total ad spend of 2011-2012, the New Age got its piece of the action was 4.5%. The rest was everybody else, as it were. So,
but is the basis of your comparison correct? I haven't had time to study this, so I'm thinking aloud. Take, for example, you say SABC, for example, got a certain amount, which is a big amount. But SABC is big and has got different TV channels, has got numerous radio stations. I don't know how many they are, but numerous. Now, did you do the exercise of, for example, saying which radio stations, for example, what did each one of the radio stations receive under SABC? What did each television channel under SABC receive? Because you see, you are comparing them with New Age. You know, as I understand, New Age didn't have other children. It was just New Age. Yes. So it seems to me, assume that we were talking of maybe a broadcasting company, maybe competing with SABC. One might have said, well, did it have as many radio stations, did it have many radio stations and television, or was it just, television? How many channels, how many radio stations? Because the more it has, namely radio stations and TV channels, then the more you can understand if it gets in terms of revenue from advertisements, because then they would go to different ones. And if, for example, you were talking about a newspaper, you know, if you you take a newspaper company that has a number of newspapers that it publishes, and you look at what it got from GCIS, so let's say it has got 5 or 6 or whatever number of newspapers. When you look at the revenue, but you simply relate the revenue, the size of the revenue to the company and not to each individual newspaper, you may well logically easily find that, of course, the revenue that New Age got is smaller than the revenue that this other newspaper company got, because it's got many newspapers. To be fair, you probably would need to take one newspaper under that group or that company which has got a lot of newspapers, look at one and then look at New Age and say, okay, let's compare. What do you say to that?
Yeah, no, Chairperson, I follow your logic, but the figures here actually reflect that. And by the way, I'm not complaining that they got more. As you can see, it's 68 million. I'm not complaining. Your line of thought is actually embedded in here, and I'm just showing what is it that we actually got, what TNA actually got. But I'm not that I'm complaining, but I'm saying this is facts as they stand. Now, also, if you maybe actually SABC is not even a competitor at TNA, because it's electronic broadcast and all of that, so there's other dynamics there and all that. But put that aside, Chairperson, even with the other newspapers, the issue for me is that they may also be, however big, in terms of circulation, but there's a spillage in that circulation, so the effective communication does not happen there, because it's just a blunt tool. It's just one paper that is universal for the country, and its usefulness to the various parts of the provinces leaves much to be desired. So therefore, there must be some pricing consideration that takes into account target marketing versus a gunshot approach. So what we have here, you've got newspapers that have got, call it a gunshot approach, and you just hope for the best and all of that. Whereas when you do the weighting of the quality of distribution, that's what comes to Chairperson, that you may have a quantity of distribution, but the qualitative aspects of that might be lacking. And as far as government is concerned, government is interested in both quality and quantity.
But let's go back to my question. Let's take outreach, for example. I understood you to be saying that's not one newspaper, or was I wrong? Outreach?
Outreach, yes.
Yeah. What they got was 199 million something, isn't it?
No, it's 199,000. It's a small publication.
Just repeat that, please.
199,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which one does City Press fall under? You mentioned one that...
At 24, just below that one, Chairperson, that's 17 million.
Yes.
Yes.
Does that not have a number of newspapers?
They've got Afrikaans, Rapport, they're a weekend newspaper, mainly.
Yeah.
So it's quite a big stable.
It's one weekend newspaper.
They've got, City Press has got, yes, got one, it's a weekend newspaper. There's no City Press on a daily.
So it's not a number of newspapers under them. That's what I'm trying to look at, bearing in mind what I was asking you earlier on, in terms of comparing.
Yeah, okay, I hear you, Chairperson. I think the question is correct. There would be at 24, maybe that would include Rapport, which is a different newspaper, City Press, I don't know, whatever else they might have. But they're mainly those two, really for the for what we're paying for here.
Yes.
That would be the weekend newspapers, really, in terms of this one.
Yes. Do you accept the proposition that, or do you have a problem with the proposition that it may be better if one compared a newspaper with a newspaper, one, as opposed to one newspaper, as opposed to a group of newspapers in one company? To get a picture of the ratio.
Yeah, well, Chairperson, it's not as, I hear you, but it's not as simplistic as that, because there's also cross-pollination. So, for instance, you find that the one newspaper could cover, the one newspaper in the group, maybe to their point, the one newspaper could cover this particular aspect. That same aspect can be covered in another sister publication and all that. Similarly, for instance, you would find that with the new age, for instance, they would have a system where much of what they would cover, whatever they cover in the newspaper, but some of it would also be covered on their TV section without you paying more, as it were. So which mitigates the issue of a circulation of a newspaper, because they have a TV aspect as well. So when they go and do a value proposition includes that although you pay for the newspaper, but you'll get some mentions on TV, as it were. So the mechanical one-on-one comparison does not work. The important thing here, Chairperson, is that these companies is the companies that you deal with a particular editorial line, as it were, and
yeah, of course, the reason why we are where we are, that is, you and me on this question, is because my understanding was that your initial approach was to simply say, look at what at 24 got, for example. Look at what the new age got. It's much more smaller, therefore, blah, 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 blah. And maybe I asked you too soon. Maybe you were still going to say,
no,
not the only better.
Yeah, no, but I think, Chairperson, perhaps that goes to the crux of the different understandings of state capture, because the narrative out there is that the new age was like gobbling up all government money. So my response here is to show that they got what they got, but let's not create the impression that this newspaper gobbled up all of government advertising. They just took what was due to them, which was in proportion to their size, as it were. So it's just talking to its size, that to be 4%, 4.5% was probably in proportion to its size. So let's not create the impression that 4.5% is actually the 100% of the spend. This is the issue, Chairperson. If you had a new age, given its size, being paid 68 million, now you are talking. But if you have a new age consuming only 4.5%, given its size, you then say, but what is this big fuss all about? Because it is in proportion to its size.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Mr. Maleka may or may not take that further, but you may proceed.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. So that's what are the numbers in terms of 2011, 2012. And also, Chairperson, on the exhibit Q5, which is on page 236 to 240, is the same kind of thing. It's the same kind of thing, just different numbers. But there you can see that, again, SABC, given its size and everything, nobody's questioning them, but they got 71 million. Naspers got 20 million. TISOP Lexla got, they went from 11 million in 2011, 2012 to more than double, to 28.7 million. And that does not mean then, Chairperson, that they doubled their circulation. This is the thing. They went from 11 million to without doubling their circulation, but they still more than doubled, almost tripled actually, their revenue, TISOP Lexta. So that's the thing, and I think after this commission here, they'll be even much more richer, as it is, because this is still their group. So that's what is happening there, Chairperson. ETV went from 8 million to 10 million. And TNA went from 8.6 million to 7, it actually went down. So in the year 2012, 2013, it was just a sliver. If you had these gadgets here, just to show in proportion, you will see then, Chairperson, that in 2012, 2013, the new age was actually 3.2%. So our number is even smaller, as it is. So the notion that they got more than their fair share is really not supported by substance, Chairperson. So that I think that covers the question of cost and all that in terms of that one. Now, Chairperson, I want to deal with the issue of Mr. Maleka wanted to know the issues surrounding the liquidation of the new age. Now, and I'm saying here, Chairperson, that in order to understand that, it's important to understand how the new age stroke NN7, that media house, was perceived. It was perceived as friendly to government, but the example I'm going to show you is going to show that it was a balanced publication which was half full as opposed to half empty, but at the same time, if there's evidence of capture, as it were, this publication would show that. And I think, Chairperson, I want to say that I think the demise of this publication was really because of its focus on what I would call white-collar corporate capture of the state. This is a phenomena that I think is actually at play in South Africa. The white-collar corporate capture of the state. And this is exemplified by the kind of reportage that the New Age was doing and so on. So back in May 2017, Chairperson, there was a project that was happening at National Treasury. That project was called IFMS, Integrated Financial Management System, which was a system meant to integrate HR, finance, and all that. It's a project that was conceived way back, I think, in 2005, but it started to be rolled out from 2009, a 4.3 billion rand project. That project, Chairperson, allow me to characterize it as a VBS cousin of VBS, that project. you're sitting here, Chairperson, and I'll go through some of the findings of the internal audit in terms of what happened in that project. Total atrocity. You will not believe, Chairperson, as I take you through, that you could find such a malfeasance. I've heard this new word mentioned a lot. You will be surprised, Chairperson, the malfeasance that is embedded at National Treasury, that the New Age reported on, that NS7 reported on, all of that, which made these publications very unpopular with everybody that was part of this white-collar corporate capture of the state, Chairperson. Now, I take you through, Chairperson, to, by way of example, if you go to Exhibit 6. Exhibit 6...
what page?
Page 241 to 246. Have you got it, Chairperson?
Yes, I think I've got it.
Yeah.
Yes.
This was a meeting of SCOPA, a recent meeting of SCOPA, which was reflecting on the things that happened in this period of this IFMS. Now, there's a lot written here, Chairperson. There's only one important sentence.
The document, which is marked, which is at page 241, maybe we shouldn't say exhibit whatever, because that might confuse the reader of the transcript with other exhibits, but it's at 241 at exhibit M1. It's written Parliamentary Monitoring Group, or PMG, Parliamentary Monitoring Group.
Yeah, that's the one.
And it says premium content from before 2017 is now available for everyone. Integrated Financial Management Systems, IFMS, hearing with National Treasury, Public Accounts in brackets, SCOPA, 5 June 2018. Chairperson, Mr. T. Godi, in brackets, APC. Yes.
That's one, Chairperson. I was only going to read of that, Chairperson, just one sentence. There's about 6 pages of this, including the minutes of SCOPA here. But I know Mr. Maleka is pressed for time. I will read just one sentence where it says, members noted that IFMS had cost 1.7 billion to date with nothing to show for it. I repeat, Chairperson. Members noted that IFMS had cost 1.7 billion to date with nothing to show for it. Yeah, now that is very devastating, Chairperson, coming out of...
Well, I just wanted to say, Mr. Manyi, it is important that you also get a fair opportunity to put what you want to put before the Commission.
Sure.
So, yes, Mr. Maleka may have complained about time, but if there is something else in this document that you wish to highlight other than one sentence, do feel free to do so.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chairperson, for your indulgence. So Chairperson, this is what SCOPA had to say. Now, this was a project of 4.3 billion. So already almost halfway through, we have not got a return on our investment. Now, what is crucial here, Chairperson, are the findings of this internal audit report. And if you go to Exhibit Q7 on page 247 to 259.
I'm sorry, Mr. Manyi. This document, is it an auditor's report or what is it?
Yes, Chairperson, it's an auditor's report.
Oh, okay.
Internal audit report.
And is PMG, Parliamentary Monitoring Group, the name of the auditing company, or?
Oh, okay. No, I beg your pardon, Chairperson. I
just want to make sure we know who the authors of the document is before we proceed.
Okay. Okay. That PMG is that Parliamentary Monitoring Group is just is a website where Parliament records electronically its proceedings.
Okay,
Yes.
it's a parliamentary
Monitoring.
entity. Or,
Yes.
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 Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, Chairperson. This is
Okay.
what recorded, what transpired.
And what's
Uh,
recorded here would have been recorded by SCOPA.
Yes, we've been recorded by
Okay,
SCOPA.
all right,
Yes,
thank you.
Chairperson. Yeah, they even have names. If you go through, there's about 6 pages of this. They even have names of which member said what. It's all there. So our Parliament is very transparent.
Okay.
Okay. So Chairperson, everything is here. Now, what was tabled there, Chairperson, when they were having this discussion, are the findings. Now, in terms of where are these findings, I put here this exhibit Q7, which you will find, Chairperson, on page 247 to 259 in your bundle. This is what was tabled there, but I summarize it on my statement, Chairperson. But these are all the things that were tabled there. But
Yes.
just so that I don't shuffle a lot of paper too much, in my statement, I summarize what is here.
Yes.
What internal audit found, Chairperson, is that in fact what they found is that there were at least 54 irregularities, basically 54 findings of irregularities, and those findings were categorized into 2: catastrophic and high risk. Of the 54 findings that were there, 49 of those findings were found to be catastrophic. So what does that catastrophic mean? It means extreme, inefficient, and ineffective operations of control. So basically, on both these categories, you could not put any reliance on the controls that were put there. So it's total chaos, Chairperson. Absolute chaos that they found there. They go through that report, Chairperson. I've summarized here just some of the things that they mention in there. One of the findings that they make there, Chairperson, is inadequate payment procedures. So in other words, you have no purpose, no scope, no objectives defined in the payment procedures. That's what they found. They found no budget information and no budget breakdown per year. This is National Treasury. In other words, no supporting documents to justify the line items towards the 4.3 billion. They found no formal independent quality assurance function in place. So basically, this thing was like on autopilot. No one says you are on the right track, you're on the wrong track. It's just free flow and all that. Then there's an office called PMO, Project Management Office. They found excessive expenditure there. They make an example, Chairperson, here that this PMO was allocated 145 million for 5 years. But what happened there, within the first 16 months, they had already spent 70 million of that, almost 50% of that, which just shows that it was, in Xhosa, Chairperson who would have said, Uvula's book. I just don't know it in English. Expenditure not related to the IFMS project. I mean, really, Chairperson, how could you find such a thing at National Treasury? Expenditure not related to the IFMS. When it's us as accounting officers, when I was in government, when you have a thing like this, they hit you with something very serious. They say unauthorized expenditure. You've used money for the purpose it was not designed for. They come with a very serious thing and they say financial misconduct, and they could even criminalize you for this. But it's happening right there at National Treasury. They spend something like 4 million to pay for something different. They pay for centralized supply database on the money that was meant for IFMS. The audit found that there were gaps identified within the SLA agreement, service level agreements. They found gaps which indicated, Chairperson, that there were no penalty clauses, there were no performance criteria. This is quite shocking, Chairperson, that such malfeasance can happen at National Treasury. no timesheets to justify bills, hours billed, no timesheets. So in other words, having worked in the consultancy space, you put on a line item there that you did research on this matter for 3 hours. You bill for 3 hours. These guys, they didn't have to do any of that, but they were billing. I then added up amount in terms of just that one line item. How much did government spend? 73 million was actually spent. If you were to total up all those timesheets where there's no justification of hours and all that. There were also no sign-offs or approval of invoices. Chairperson, in government, you can't just pay. An invoice must be approved. And what that approval process entails is to check if things happened as go through all the checklist. In this case, National Treasury didn't have the checklist, and so on. Just bills were just approved. Internal audit also found there were duplicate payment. So I found that quite interesting as to what that is. Duplicate payment, Chairperson, talks to what I call staggered payment in my language. So what would happen is that there would be a bill that says, we're charging you from services from the 1st of this month to the 25th of the month. But then at the same time, in that same period, you'll have another bill in the middle of that will say from the 10th of this month, maybe to the 1st of the next month. So you have an area that is overlapping right there. But both those invoices will be paid as if it's two pieces of work happening in sequence. So actually, it was a serious issue that was happening there. Now, this is just a Chairperson, as it relates to payment services. The auditors did not look at how those companies were procured. They did not look at all other things. This is just on the one line item on payment of service, and this is how much atrocity they found. I shudder to think what would have happened if they had also audited how all these suppliers were also part of this, Chairperson. So this does not help in terms of engendering confidence. You hear, Chairperson, people saying Treasury must be protected. And I'm saying to myself, that is very true, Treasury must be protected. But the question is from who? And I would say, Chairperson, this is the kind of thing that National Treasury must be protected from. But the narrative given out there is that it's otherwise everything well. And Chairperson, I think Mr. Pravin Gordhan said something very important here, that when we root out the cancer, we must root out all of it. I agree with him. And this is part of the cancer that must be rooted out, Chairperson. I totally agree with him. We must root out all the cancer. So then what followed? So I'm mentioning this, Chairperson, as some of the things that have made this media house unpopular, because then there was.
So you are saying, are you saying that this is one of the issues that the New Age published, for which it might have made it unpopular in certain circles?
Correct, Chairperson. If you go to Exhibit Q8, it's actually there.
What's the page?
On page 260.
Yes.
On page 260 is an example of what New Age would have reported on this matter.
Yes.
Yes. So that's what a headline there, Treasury chaos and all that. So that's what New Age would report. And then you would have Treasury people saying we're targeting, or they're saying Treasury is being targeted and all of that, when in fact the New Age was reporting the truth, something based on an internal audit report of National Treasury. This is what the New Age was reporting on, and then the response is that National Treasury is being unfairly targeted. There's no unfairly targeting. We are exposing the rot that is being unearthed by an internal audit of National Treasury, not of anybody else. National Treasury audit is the one that did this work, and this is what is happening there. So, Chairperson, as I quote towards the closure, then this, Chairperson, in my view, talks to the next thing I want to talk to is the issue of the what then happened. Then the forensic investigation was ordered. Just to cut the long story short, there was a forensic investigation, and I think.
I'm sorry, Mr. Manyi, I didn't look at the time. You see, it helps when when there's counsel standing there, because then they can tell me it's time for a lunch adjournment. I just realized now on my watch it's 11 minutes past 1. How long still do you think you would take?
No, Chairperson, let's go to lunch. I've got.
It's better to go to lunch.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. We'll take the lunch adjournment, and we'll resume at 2:15. We adjourn.
Are we?
No, this was all Aaron said, must come back to the office.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Uhambi, but now I'm talking for you. And she, you know what confused me? The brief and was like, oh, okay, cool. Then Manje, she calls and says, and asks, okay, am I doing it or I'm going to do it? But who Facebook? Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, they have to switch that side.
Ow. Those people. Wenzeni? Ngizoza nami ukuzotestify.
Era to Nhlonhla.
Do you know what? What? Do you have that thing? Connector? Yeah. I don't. Yes, that's mine. I'm not going to use my phone. Okay, okay. Hey, share me the files, man.
What has happened right now in Mzwanele Manyi is basically providing a statement that he had prepared. Remember when he was called, so he needed to answer a few questions because the commission felt that there were a few issues that they needed to clarify, throwing some evidence given by Phumza. So when it was then time for him to then take that stand, so he then requested
One, two.
before those questions to him, because remember they had forwarded to him the written questions, so he basically has an idea of what the commission wants to know. So what he said was let him include perhaps to give a proper context so that when the evidence leader in this instance, Vincent Malega, puts those questions, he has a bit of context. So that is what he is doing right now. So he hasn't concluded yet. So he basically and then spoke about how the question of advertising and funding from GCIS to various newspapers happened. But of course, you know, this is subjected to a lot of discrimination from the legal team. And basically saying the reason why newspapers have hated so much is because of what it terms corporate, white collar, corporate capture, so I'm completely right. So it says they covered a lot of malfeasance in the treasury, a lot of wrongdoing in the treasury. So it says as a result, so they hate it. But as I'm saying again,
I'm old. I need a chair like this chair is this is not practice for.
those questions haven't had
So wasn't phone now? Yeah.
they will do that as soon as they return from lunch. But he will continue, he has no his presentation, and then from there, then the legal team will take him on, so to speak.
So uthi le nxusi le ithini kahle kahle? Ngisho bayamtshela ukuthi kuyenzeka so. And then too much energetic.
I think what will happen
He's too much energetic. Energy always wants to call me on your phone now.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Sharp, sharp. Corporate. White collar corporate state capture.
I'm sorry, nearly hit it.
Oh, nguzwile actually. At the corporate, white. White.
You know.
Tom Moyani, guys. It's over.
Now
it's over. Like he should just like. Yeah, just give up. Yeah.
I'm sure it's a lot.
Yeah, just like.
Enjoyable.
Yeah, it's okay.
But no, you know, after this, we'll be like still chasing him. His name is still gonna be.
Yeah, I know it's gonna come up. Remember that he's gonna come here.
We'll let you know.
Yeah, remember that he's gonna come here.
Phone keeps vibrating. I'm thinking it's ringing. I better see. I won. I won again.
What? Oh, am I on television? Wow, I'm on that screen, and that screen, and that screen, and that screen, and that screen. Viewership yeah increase.
Yeah, I don't like screen.
Clearly, uthi bafake state cap.
What's my? They don't tell the color pass, or I think they've left. It's
Oh.
so instead of putting, you see if they had a logo there.
Yeah,
State
like
cap.
this side.
You want to see that one now?